So,
Yeah.
welcome to Slay Your Dragons with Compassion, that my podcast, which is run in conjunction with online events. And I'm really pleased to have today a really great friend who has done some amazing work in the world, which we'll talk a little bit about, and also about his journey to arrive at the place where he is making some great changes for people in an extraordinary environment. So today, my guest is Roger Tempest, who um, he calls himself the custodian rather than the owner, but he is the owner of and custodian of Broughton Hall, which is a 3,000-acre stately home. And some wonderful things are happening there, including rewilding projects and extraordinary conferences and a wonderful sort of like retreat environment, which I've had the pleasure of going to a number of times. So, Roger, welcome to our show here today.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Yes,
Looking forward to our chat.
lovely. That's great. Well,
From Bali.
we've done chats before together as well, which is really nice to revisit this as well. So I'm really interested in what you've done. I mean, you could very easily have been a sort of like, sort of like a sort of like a feckless lord of the manor and just sort of like hung out in this beautiful stately home and pounced around. But in fact, you've been doing extraordinary things. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your vision of Broughton and what's happened. And then we'll look a little bit later at what's happened in terms of your inward state that's actually sort of asked you to go to that environment.
Yeah, I mean, to start with, it's what came to mind just to me just then, actually. My mum, whose birthday was yesterday, but she's passed a couple of years ago, and I was just thinking, I remember her talking, but she worked for Mother Teresa for most of her life, and quite in depth with her, and remarkable work. And it just, Mother Teresa's quote, I think it was by her anyway, which said, "God gave us the gift of life, and what we become is our gift to God." And whatever your religion are, whatever, it's just quite powerful, that. And, you know, I was born in this particular situation where 32 generations of the same family had sort of homed into this place in the back of Yorkshire. And, you know, bringing it into the 21st century, it's this sort of alchemy has occurred there. And from it being a sort of, it was, yes, hierarchy, yes, feudal in a way, and all these sort of different, sort of attributes through history. But in fact, we've been sort of surviving there and hopefully contributing to society in many ways. But suddenly in the 21st century, there's so much change, what's breaking down and what's breaking through on every level. I suppose suddenly Broughton is alive to that, very much alive to it. And the irony is we're all about the future. This 3,000-acre beautiful bit of land and a very historic house at the centerpiece of it, 97 rooms, pretty big. But we've adapted it to sort of take into account what's happening in society, what's happening to the world, what's happening to humanity. And we've been on this alchemy, I'm not sure the word, alchemical journey. And it's sort of a really beautiful journey, and it sort of comes from the heart, really. And yes, there's been a lot of privilege, in one way, although we've certainly suffered over the years. My father was shot in the head in the war. My grandfather was bombed in the Somme. We've had pretty serious situations throughout history, but with privilege comes responsibility. And, there's this sort of this turning point, which I'm very interested in, and sort of being brought up, especially through my mum, which I've been really aware of this last couple of days. Privilege comes with responsibility, and to be a force for good. And, I think it's a beautiful thing to be. And I love the St. Francis thing, in giving you receive, this sort of a whole mood of things. And you suddenly realize, oh my God, what you can do. By the way, I'm coming across a bit, I'm not some Christian missionary. I'm purely quite a universalist, in many, many ways. And I just, this what we can do in the world is rather remarkable. I'm fascinated. I'm 60 years old now, and I want to be of help and be a bonus to the world and not a drag. And that leads on to many issues.
And you already are. And in fact, interestingly, what you were saying reminds me of Rabindranath Tagore's little three-line saying, which is, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I woke and found that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. And I
Beautiful.
really see the pleasure you have in the creation, which we'll talk a little bit more about, in the creation that you've managed to make in this corner of Yorkshire, in this beautiful home, which is home to lots of different projects now. So perhaps you
Yeah.
can tell us a bit about what you're doing at Broughton.
Well, some of the main things, I mean, a week before COVID, we launched as aiming to be the leading, UK retreat centre. That was our aim. And so we built Avalon, and Avalon means an island of spiritual refuge, as you probably know. And that's a sort of state-of-the-art well-being centre. And then we have the 130 beds and all this sort of thing. So we were going to be a retreat centre a week before COVID. So we had loads of retreats joining and booked in, and suddenly COVID and everything cancelled. So it was a tough time. I remember for 3 months, I got a little baby too. I had to work to midnight every day for 3 months, like everybody else in England. It was, a very, very serious issue. And but anyway, we came out of that, and we're doing sort of about 50 retreats a year now, and they vary, from Path of Love, Hoffman process, all this sort of, residential, usually a week, and obviously your good self. And so we're really into the retreat world and trying to personal transformation journeys, and we're very interested in the content. So whether we have Tommy Rosen from Recovery 2.0, or we have Peter Levine, for trauma, or we have David Mitten, whoever it is, the content is very wide and it's very beautiful. But alongside all that, we've got a lot of different projects running. So, and they vary quite extensively. I mean, one of them is a major environmental project. So we decided the time is over for industrialized farming, in effect, and this 3,000 acres we wanted to make. We went on a nature recovery journey, and we nearly planted 400,000 trees in the last 3 or 4 years, and to help with the flooding, the biodiversity, and then the farmland. Our aim is, there's many ways of farming, and we've decided on the nature friendly way of farming. So, we don't want vaccines, hormones, fertilizers, antibiotics, chemicals, all this sort of thing. And so we've gone in a very clean form of farming. So the whole land is changing at the same time. And that nature recovery project, in effect, and the semi-rewilding is, I suppose it's an external form of what we believe should be happening internally. So you've got the outer nature, and then you've got the inner nature. And so we're huge believers that the, nature is this amazing antidote and, vital for human existence. And it's been disregarded for too long, would be our opinion. And so its effect on inner nature has been disconnected for too long. And so our inner nature, we really want to make sure those inner nature, outer nature goes in the same way as in another way, not to be too controversial, but, life has become extremely polarized, and the outer state seems to have dominated, and we seems to have lost our way in terms of our inner state. So I don't want to be too philosophical, but that's the sort of essence of some of the projects we're doing. And to add to these projects, we're clustering really interesting projects. So something like Weird Organization, which does sound a bit weird, but Weird is our old, ancestral tribal name, WYRD. And the Weird Organization came from, it was started in Princeton University, and it was about the calibration and of consciousness and how consciousness affected material objects. And we've got a project set up at Broughton, which is very active, and it's sort of beyond AI, really. So we're birthing as many sort of ideas around the whole sanctuary. And one thing I didn't really mention before is that we decided to rename, because this journey is fairly extensive of how the change is happening on a place, this 3,000 acre bit of land in the back of Yorkshire. we decided that Broughton Sanctuary is a more accurate definition of what we're about, because we want to be this sanctuary and this sort of force for good, this little jewel, and hopefully this little jewel will string with many other jewels throughout, throughout the world. And we're sort of essentially doing our bit to say, if we can do it, what can other people do? There is great, there's hope, but hope needs to be put into action. Yeah. So all in all the projects we're doing, we're essentially a retreat center for personal transformation. And Andrew Harvey, who's I think the most beautiful person in terms of articulating spirituality, was I think he sort of maybe a bit grand, but you're saying it's a sort of, Broughton could be a maternity ward for the birthing of a new humanity. And I know that sounds a bit a bit dramatic, but the idea is there that each individual in life can do things to change the course of how we live in our communities and whatever. And as you see in the world at the moment, there's so much anger and sort of engine houses of hate really all over the world in any shape or form, however it comes, whether it's war or single individual activism or whatever. And I just think if we can be as this sort of fulcrum and this sort of holding space, in a beautiful way, I just think it adds to life and this potential of rebirthing of humanity. Sounds a bit dramatic, but
well, no, I can certainly see, and I've known you a number of years, and it was really interesting because we met when I was working for schools for head teachers in Yorkshire, and you and I arranging to have a meeting in London, and I said, I said, where do you live? And you said Skipton. I said, well, I come to Skipton 3 or 4 times a year, so I've been staying with you when I've been doing that, and I've watched the progress of Broughton Hall and been very inspired by what you've created there. But I'm also inspired, Roger, by the depth of work. I mean, you talked about through the pandemic working till midnight. It feels to me like pandemic or no pandemic, you work your butt off. And it's like you've got the fire. It's not a religious zeal, but it's a zeal for doing your bit for humanity. And that's what I can see. And what I'm interested in is what led you to that place? Because clearly your mother has been an influence.
Yeah.
I mean, what you've described about her with Mother Teresa, and of course I knew about all that as well. But so she's been an influence. But what is it that's actually had you go, this is how I want to use this precious life I'm living?
I'm influenced by your work, Malcolm, too. And I've obviously read your books and been, all that you've done with founding, co-founding or whatever it was of alternatives and, all these things. And I think, we're probably in the same peas in the same pod in a way, in terms of,
yes.
Recognize that, there is crisis in society on so many levels, environmentally to, on every level, really. It's a pretty, it's tricky. And then there's beauty, there's beauty within life. But I just feel an urgency of, I've always felt an urgency, which I felt I could help with. And whether that's come from, my maternal influences or, we were a persecuted family. We were Catholic heritage. We were recusants. So we got hung, drawn and quartered for our faith. And then,
wow.
Dad was part of, in April 1945, part of the British Army rescuing concentration camps, and he was at Nuremberg trials. It was
wow.
Absolutely,
I didn't know that. Yes.
Yeah. And what he witnessed was unbelievable. It just it's hard to even imagine. And so I think from being in a privileged position too, at times I give a talk sometimes called Snow on the Billiard Table, which sounds a bit ridiculous, but we have this big historic house and it did snow on the billiard table, and it's sort of, we were wrapped up for dinner in coats and, putting antifreeze down the loo and all that sort of thing. It was pretty, it wasn't all privileged, to be honest, but we are very lucky. And I don't know, I've just the beauty of, in giving. I just feel really elated to it. And Paris, my partner, is very like-minded on it, and we just get enormous pleasure of the work we do. And it's not easy, and it takes, it's financial risk, it's it's a huge commitment, but it's very, very rewarding. And I just feel we are part of this movement of change, and it has to come from somewhere. It's down to the individual. Like, this quote about, the individual affects the family or your partner, and your partner affects, your outer family, and the outer family affects the community, and the community affects the world. And so, for me, it's a very natural thing to do. I'm not sure I get it right all the time at all, I can tell you that. But it is philosophically, I'm very, I'm a great believer. It is a sort of, it probably is connected with a sort of religious fervor, I suppose. I'm very much universalist, value, the human constructs which try to sort of put together all these religions and different things. I respect them, but beyond all that, I think the connection with God I feel quite immediate, without having to put it in too much of a box. And I'm fascinated. We have this annual conference called Visions for the Future, and we get 60 thought leaders together, and which I know you know about. And whether it can be Rupert Sheldrake, it can be people like Bruce Damer, whoever it is, incredible people, spiritual people, and no, cross section. It's a wide cross section. At the end of it all, there's 4 or 5 days of discussing of what's happening in life and what's happening to humanity. And it's residential. We spend a lot of time together, and it's amazing what at the end of the day it comes down to what the individual can do in life and what they can give and how they affect life. And I think personally, we've been fixated by the polarizations and the outer state, and these sort of, I regard them as slightly delusional ideas of, say, communism, or some far sort of totalitarian aspect of how to run life. And I think I'm not advocating any politics. I think we should rise above politics, and it should be rise above the polarizations and find this beautiful space in between where we got this common existence. And I know it's of tolerance and love and all that sort of thing. People think, oh, that's hippie heaven. Well, actually, I don't believe it is. I think personal responsibility coupled with community effort plus is a recipe where, as humanity, we can really live together. And I think there's definitely a lack of visionaries out there at the moment. There's voices appearing from everywhere in small ways, and some amazing people who are sort of percolating up, but how they can rise above some of the existing political institutions who I think it's a hard battle. And I think, but there's definitely a movement coming forward. But I think there's a lot of distractions. It's like we've been invited at Broughton Sanctuary to do some sort of civil disobedience work type thing, training groups, and we've actually said no. We're looking for harmonious things which create more harmony, and through love and through but that doesn't mean you can't confront the difficult issues. But
it's true. Funny, I remember I remember at Alternatives we had Joanna Macy, who's a wonderful wise woman, and was the co-founder of Deep Ecology, and now in her 80s, maybe even in her 90s now. And the last time she spoke at Alternatives, she said, we are entering a new age. This is the age of the great turning. We don't know whether this will be the end of humanity, and that we're actually sort of like we're an experiment that has passed its time and something else will happen and take its place, or whether we're going to evolve and become what humanity needs, which is very much what you seem to be talking about. And she said, it doesn't matter. At one level, it doesn't matter what happens, but we have to invest in the possibility of a better world. And I can really see that you are throwing your energy into that as well. And, I think it's part of what keeps us young. I mean, I'm 74 now, and you're 60. We're two old gents having a chat, but we're
Yeah,
not.
we are. Lucky we're not playing golf.
We're lucky we're not, exactly. But what I see, and it's interesting. I went to my school's 50th reunion in 1968, and what I saw was that three-quarters of the people I'd gone to school with were old men, but some of them weren't, and the ones who weren't, the ones who had passion, the ones who had a drive to make a difference in the world, well, even if it was a drive to make money in their case, but my sense is you're not driven by material want or need. What you're driven by is a sense that something is needed and you want to play your part in that, as do I.
Yeah, 100%. And I was just thinking, this little haven of Broughton Sanctuary, 3,000 acres, a couple of hundred buildings. We built this sort of community. We have 50 companies based there in old buildings, heritage buildings and things, who are Silver Cross prams and things like this. So we built a sort of modern economy alongside a community of people. So we sort of create this sort of, I don't know, it's metaphoric field that people come and plug in, whether it's for coming for a retreat or a holiday or enjoy the nature recovering or whatever it is, they're plugging in. And then we're restoring architecture, we're creating arts, we're creating, education, all these things. And what I'm trying to say is that I'm not saying it's a modern utopia, but it's a possibility. You can get this coexistence of a community which sort of has this equilibrium between culture, economy, social, and is it possible to do that? And I think we're sort of proving that it is possible. And then some things like the Weird organization, which specializes in consciousness, is something a bit odd. But then we also have an addiction center, and then we have, all these things. And we're in the back of rural Britain. And yes, there is a pub, and yes, there is a church, and yes, there is a little school and things like this. And it's sort of, if it's possible there's sort of creating this particular community, can you replicate it? And, it's a regeneration. And I think humanity is permanently reforming and regenerating. And
Exactly.
as you were saying about Macy, it seems to be the roots. Which way are we going to go?
Yes.
Are we going to go on the extreme, nuclear just bomb, and there's this, apocalypse, and it's absolutely dramatic? Or are we going to find a way through it and create this new Garden of Eden in a way, and suddenly realizing we really do have these options in life? Do we want to be angry people and causing death and destruction, or do we want to just get this realize if you give, life is a gift, and give and create and be, like in a family situation, you all have to be, you all have to take everybody in the family into consideration and hopefully come up with a way of living. And I suppose that choice is sitting there now with humanity. And are we, we're talking about old men, I was thinking, are we as two individuals sitting here, and are we replicating the thought of previous generations at our age, thinking, oh, we're a bit depressed about the world, or are we the real realists? And in the old days, people of age, I mean, we still got a bit to go, but there'll be the wisdom keepers, and they'll be respected. And with the modern, the last 100 years, with the politics of everything, have we lost that wisdom and that respect for the learning? Have we forgotten about history? Have we?
I think these things get shrouded, and I think you're right. I think if we look at the political arena and look for guidance there, able to lie, cheat, steal, the sort of the new sort of like
Disappointing.
Alternate truth or something like that. It's like it's a very different world than the world I started life in. But then we can look at the people around who are making a difference, and it's like these little pockets are springing up, and
they are.
it can only be hope that actually there are people who are willing to actually go, I want to do my bit in the world. I want to play my part. Because according to the old Hindu philosophy, we are in the age of Kali Yuga. We're in the age. Oh,
Today.
really? Is it? Oh my God!
Celebrations. Yep.
Oh God. Okay. Well, and it's a time when we're in a time of ignorance, but apparently the world goes in cycles, and every sort of 20,000 years or whatever it is, the next cycle comes on. So the golden age will come next where we do live more honestly. I mean, these simple practices we could have to be more alive in who we are, speaking authentically, caring, being giving, loving, meditating, sort of taking time to calm ourselves and tune into our inner voices. These are the things that are starting to make a difference. It's small and it's easy to get overwhelmed and go, we are living in hell. We watch wars around us and we watch terrible suffering around us, but we have to keep contributing to the potential vision that sits in front of us as well.
Yeah, 100% with you. And I think in terms of it, back to Mother Teresa at one stage, I remember talking about, she was more concerned about the spiritual poverty of the West than the City of Joy in Calcutta. And I don't know whether that Dominic Lapierre book you read, City of Joy. I don't know whether you read it, but
yes.
We each one of us, if we individually contribute, each drop in the ocean, adds up.
It does.
Adds up. But I mean, the psychology of because I know you're from reading, your books on, the psychological state of us as humans, and there seems to be a need for a remarkable amount of tools, and maybe AI is going to help us with therapeutic use. And I'm on a advisory board for Minds in America for the use of psychedelics for therapeutic use, from relationships to addiction, to all these things. And it feels like this new era that we need to reflect on ourselves and where we've got to. And I think what I do notice, I put it very simply, that when I looked at our land at Broughton Sanctuary 20 years ago, I can't believe I was sort of so ignorant of the glyphosate, the this, the that, the hormones, what we're doing to the stock, and now I see it, but I hadn't seen it before. And it's like, in the whole world, what else is like that? And suddenly the human brain seems to, oh, yeah, I get it now, but I was lost, and, now I found it.
And what's great is that you don't have a missionary zeal. You're doing your thing, and people come and drink in the results of what you've done. Well, one of the things I love about Broughton is that it's not, obviously it's a beautiful and expensive place. It's like, magnificent food and lovely environment and a spa and all of the rest of it. But you've also hosted things like compassionate mental health conferences, which I was part of, and it was just so beautiful to see people who are normally, a lot of people who've been in the mental health system, been victims of horrible abuse and treatment in some cases, but being nourished and actually drinking from the fountains that you provide at Broughton. And I love what you say about nature. I know I was saying to someone the other day, one day I was feeling really flat and depressed, and I forced myself to get out into nature. And without realizing it, after I'd been out for about half an hour in the forest and woods, luckily I live nearby that sort of stuff, I realized that my spirits had been lifted, that nature had actually had an impact on me. There's a wonderful book, I don't know if you've read The Overstory by Richard Powers.
No.
It's about the secret life of trees. It's a novel, and it's about eco-terrorists, effectively. But what he explains in this is how trees communicate, and we don't recognize there's a fantastic consciousness out there in nature as well. I worked for a while for Greenpeace, and I watched that the dolphins and the whales were sublimely evolved beings, and we've got all this around us.
And fungus and mushrooms.
And fungus, of course, yes.
Oh, Cosmo Sheldrake.
Yes.
But no, absolutely. And at Broughton, we've done this. We've just creating this this thing called Odyssey, which is it's a journey of mind, body, and spirit over 30 kilometers, and it has activated points from screaming fields to all sorts of different things. But we've had two or three people, well, three people I know have come to Broughton, and they've just broken down in tears, because they said, you know, why wasn't this here before? I mean, I've just, you know, it's like, so what we're doing is actually unfolding something, which is inevitable in a way. And I suppose, you know, all the things we do, you know, whether we have moon baths and sweat lodges and, you know, woodland saunas, and it goes on, cosmic gardens, and, you know, they're all sort of places where people can, you know, interact and, you know, within nature, and who has not been for a walk and never felt better at the end of it? Very, very.
Yes.
Green prescriptions. I think, you know, the NHS should just have them at all times. You know, it's just
Well, some time ago when I was at Broughton, I did something called forest bathing, which I'd never heard of before I'd actually gone to Broughton, and it's quite a big movement apparently. But we were led through the forest, and in turn noticing different things. So I think the first exercise was noticing the very small things. So you take time to be in the forest and observe that. The next was slowing down and seeing what you observe when you move at a much slower pace. And I love that experimentation with nature. And again, when I came out at the end of it, I felt absolutely refreshed and renewed.
Isn't it good? And what I love is when we have the retreats, at the end of a retreat, people, if I'm around, you know, whatever, because I'm pretty active there, they just come up to me and just, you know, will say, my life's changed, or I've got over something, or it's so rewarding. It's
lovely.
Just, you know, just the change. And there aren't enough places, you know, where you can do that. There's very, very, you know, it's not enough. And hopefully they'll build these light centers, or whatever you like to call them. They'll quietly build, and then people do have a refuge. And, you know, because it's hard. I mean, I know you're part of a sharing group, men's circle, I think, aren't you?
Yes.
And, you know, I do a men's circle, and Paris, you know, my partner does a women's circle too. And they're so valuable. They're just sort of, you know, what you share, you just, you know, people can, without judgment, can, you know, it's done in a particular way, and it's such a beautiful thing. And, you know, retreats are obviously an extension of that, but professional people who can help people in their lives, because, you know, if you want to carry the world on your shoulders and do nothing about it, you know, it's a tricky life, probably.
Well, we're practicing structures that help feed the soul. I mean, what we're seeing is and interesting in Gibbon's in the Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire talks about one of the features for the fall of the Roman Empire was the breakdown of the family unit. And what we're practicing as we observe the breakdown of the family unit here as well, we're observing also that we're having to create alternate family units. So we're having to create what I've talked about, slay your dragons with compassion, as the Buddhist term of Sangha. And we need others around us of like mind so that we can have the strength to carry through and do what it is we are meant to do. And James Hillman, the psychotherapist, talks about that each one has inside us a diamond, Daemon, and that will drive us nuts until we do the work we were born to do. And I can very much see you're doing the work you were born to do, Roger. And it would be so easy for you to be a pompous ass, and you're so not that. Yes.
Yeah, I hope not.
No, you're definitely not. And there's something very lovely about that. That actually there is a humility in the midst of all that you're doing. There is also a humility there, a recognition there's something bigger than you in play.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, being of service is a real, you know, that's the ultimate privilege, really. You know, really.
Yeah.
We live in a, you know, a lovely house, 3-bedroom house. We don't live in the main hall, or, you know, you alternate everything.
Yes.
But what do you call this? I was interested, Malcolm, what you would think about. What would you call this movement? You know, in the terms of, like, in Scotland or wherever it started, the Enlightenment movement sort of came over a 20-30 year period, but its name came afterwards, I think. You know,
Yes.
and I just wonder, because I know you've been involved 100%, you know, with alternatives to everything. You've seen all the major players in this transformational, you know, world. I mean, how would you see this movement? Because I haven't put a name to it yet, but I know it exists, and the like-minded.
Yeah.
You know, it's a wide spectrum, but there's something consistent in it.
I mean, we used to call it the New Age, but I think that that has been so hackneyed now. And I think also there are so many people who are um, who profess spirituality, who are actually sort of like who are sort of not grounded. So I think there is something that's being, and I think maybe it's. I'd be interesting to find a name for this, but
I think it deserves a name.
I think it deserves a name, but I think it deserves a proper name, not a sort of a flaky, sort of like
No.
you know, sort of like a new agey sort of name. But
No, New Age was sort of a forerunner. I mean, I sort of compare it to the technology where, when Apple IIe computers came out in the 80s or whatever, and, software and apps and all this sort of thing. And, calculator. At school, I didn't have a calculator. And then the last year, I think they came in or whatever.
yeah,
And I was just thinking that, this whole movement it's actually still very juvenile and small, but there's a
yeah,
momentum which you can just feel under the surface. And, as we get retreat after retreat, sometimes 100 people, whatever, 60, you just sort of, witnessing. And I'm in Bali at the moment, and, the amount of people out here with the different sort of work going on, or there's something, it's just it feels like it could go exponential.
yes. Well, it's interesting though, because it's like when I was first involved in a spiritual psychological search in my life, I was in my late 20s, early 30s. And at that time, yoga was weird. Vegetarianism was for hippies.
Yeah.
Um, and life has changed. And I think we are seeing very gradually, it's very easy to see all the horrors that are out there in the world. But I think we're also seeing very gradually the nourishment that we're able to provide for ourselves and each other. And my biggest thing, I realized the most important chapter I wrote in my book was the chapter on Sangha, because I so believe it's like the I Ching says, until we reach a certain stage in our evolution, not only do we have a need for the support of others of like mind, we have a duty to seek that support. And I think there's something there about that actually we are learning to band together. We're learning to become brothers and sisters rather than using each other to develop our selfish aims.
Yeah.
And so we're coming towards the end of our. I mean, I could chat to you for hours, Roger, and I so appreciate you coming on this
Yeah,
show. I feel it's been beautiful what we've done today.
oh,
But I'd like to read you because this was in my mind as you were talking before about. So this is a piece that I've used in my book from George Bernard Shaw, and it's about purpose. So I'd like to read that just so that this is, in fact, to back up a lot of what you've been talking about today. So if you'll bear with me for a couple of seconds, so I'll do that. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle for me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I have got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations.
whoa, that's really good. That
is lovely. But you've been saying pretty much that in what you've been speaking about as well. And I think that is part of the energy that drives us forward. It's so easy to become depressed and to sort of go, the world's a terrible place, rather than seeing that actually there's regeneration that's possible. And it's happening at a very organic, simple level. But hopefully it will ignite. And the 100 monkey theory is that when enough people have that consciousness, the world will change.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's because it's an important Hindu day today in Bali. There's a lot of ceremonies going on. It reminds me of I think it's a Hindu quote, and it's very simple. It goes, "All that is not given is lost." All that is not good.
Wow. Oh, that's
I
lovely.
thought that was rather nice. If we're finishing off, I thought it was a rather nice one.
That's a great quote to
George
finish.
Bernard Shaw in a Hindu quote. You can't get it better than that.
Perfect. Maybe George Bernard Shaw was a Hindu after all, but anyway. But thank you so much for coming on here and for taking part. I've really enjoyed the engagement with you, and I enjoy the passion you bring to the work that you do as well, Roger. So really good to see you, and we will catch up. We'll speak soon anyway. So we'll catch up soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Malcolm.
Thank you.